Ah, you will do amazing things. Can you feel that? Can you breathe into that? Do you believe that? Do you believe that you will do amazing things? I believe you will do amazing things, and I believe that we collectively will do amazing things. I really do believe that. And one of the resources that will enable us to, let me just pause. Wasn't that such a moving song by Reverend Michael Gott? So moving. I just feel that energy. Okay, I digress. However, one of the resources that we'll use in order to do amazing things is the power of divine wisdom. Those of us who are those of us who are very familiar with unity are familiar with the power of wisdom. And today we're going to talk about divine wisdom. And I love this particular photo here because I love how just above wisdom there is an arrow. There's an arrow. That's important to remember. That's important to remember. An arrow implies a direction, does it not? So that's very important when it comes to understanding wisdom. As many of us know, and as an introduction to anyone who may not, the co-founder of the Unity movement is a gentleman named Charles Fillmore. He, along with his wife, co-founded the Unity movement. And one of the beautiful inspirations that came to Charles and that he articulated is the idea that each of us as human beings, we have these 12 unique aspects to ourselves, or are these 12 capabilities that spring forth from our divine nature. And he entitled these 12 capabilities the 12 powers. 12 is a very sacred number. As we know in scripture, there are 12 disciples, there are 12 tribes. We know from as we look into the skies that there are 12 signs of the zodiac, 12 months of the year. So this 12 has a very sacred significance to it. Charles articulated these 12 powers, and on the screen that you see here is a listing of these 12 powers, as well as a picture of these 12 powers illustrated as meridians or energy centers in the body. Charles believed that these 12 powers, that there was a corresponding energy point in the body that corresponded to these 12 powers. And you can see them listed on each side of the picture: will, understanding, faith, zeal, power or dominion, love, wisdom, strength, order, elimination, and life. And these powers work together, and we are using these powers all the time. These particular capabilities and resources, we use them every day. As a matter of fact, there is not a situation where we cannot use them. Everything that we do using these powers in different formulations. Sometimes one of these powers or a few of them will seem to be more predominant in a situation than others. However, we're still using all of them with everything that we do. And one of the cool things that we do in Unity, since there are 12 months in the year and 12 powers, each month we take a particular power and put it in focus for further study and examination, and so that we can really get some juicy morsels out of it. This month, as Patty Yoon so beautifully shared with us in her introduction, the power that we celebrate this month, we celebrate the power of wisdom. The power of wisdom. Wisdom is that power, as you see on your screen, to practically apply what is known, intuitively discern, and make heart connections. Some other words that are associated with the idea of with discerning would be to evaluate, to appraise, or to judge. And then as we evaluate, discern, appraise, or judge, it gives us a power to practically I'm getting tongue-tied, to practically apply what it is that we know. And then as we practically apply it, going back to that first slide where you have that arrow, now we have a sense of direction in terms of knowing what is ours to do, or what steps we might take, or what decisions that we might make. Typically in our common cultural understanding, we think of wisdom as being a collection of knowledge or a body of knowledge. However, Charles reminds us that although acquiring knowledge or embracing a certain kind of understanding is a component of wisdom, the essence and the heart of what wisdom is, it is not a knowledge collection thing so much as it is a navigational resource. When we take in wisdom, or when we apply wisdom, or when we incorporate the power of wisdom, we are doing so that we have a way of being able to situationally navigate through a certain situation, through a certain challenge, through a certain experience of our lives, so that we have a sense of direction on where to go, a sense of direction from which we should base our decisions on, so that we know how to go. And that's what wisdom is. And again, as I mentioned earlier, as with all the other 12 powers, we are using the power of wisdom all the time. All the time, whether we may be conscious of it or not, we are constantly discerning, and we're evaluating, and we're praising, and we're weighing things out. And we're doing so based upon whatever particular level of consciousness or knowledge that we may be operating on at the time. And so from that evaluating and that discerning, we move to the power of will to decide upon what choices we're going to make, or what we're going to do in response to the wisdom activity. So we're using this power. And so the invitation today is to number one, recognize that we're always using this power all the time. And number two, be intentional about making high and holy use of this power, so that we can have, as I commonly like to say, a very rewarding and enriching experience of life. And so that's where the idea of divine wisdom comes in. Because we can use wisdom from the basis of cultural knowledge, or from the basis of what they call worldly knowledge and understanding, or we can be intentional about using wisdom based upon divine understanding, based upon divine guidance, and based upon divine promptings. That's the highest use of this faculty or this power of wisdom. So that's the invitation today. Now, how do we ensure that we are using this power of wisdom? As I say, how do we ensure that we're using it from a high and holy place? How do we ensure that we're using this wisdom from the deepest, most purest energy and resonance and knowledge of ourselves? How do we ensure that? Well, in Unity, if we're about nothing else, we are about prayer. And so in the Unity movement, we strongly advocate the practice of prayer and the practice of meditation. I, Art Handy, am on a personal crusade to liberate the idea of prayer from its religious underpinnings and trappings. There are some people that when you mention the idea of prayer, if they are religion adverse, or if they're a person who has been hurt by past religious experiences, they'll immediately shut off. I don't want to hear anything about prayer. Prayer is spiritual breathing, much like our lungs and our respiratory system is breathing that feeds our material body. Prayer is an activity that feeds our spiritual body. And the more that we engage in prayer, and the more that we engage in meditation, among all of the benefits that come from that, we do a rearrangement in our brains where we develop neurological pathways to be responsive, not just to what we experience in materiality and in physicality, but becoming responsive to the invisible, to the subtle, and to the mystery. And the more that we have a heart-mind consciousness that is responsive to the mystery and responsive to the invisible and responsive to subtle energies, the more we open ourselves up to experience divine guidance. The more that we open ourselves up to experience those subtle nudges so that we can be informed by a sixth sense. When we open ourselves up that way, now we open ourselves up to a divine knowing and a divine compass. So when it comes to wisdom, it's not just about knowing. Wisdom is really about knowing the knower. I'm going to say that again. Wisdom is not just about knowing. Wisdom is about knowing the knower. And the word knower, I'm going to capitalize that K. So what is the knower? The knower is the divinity that you are. The knower is the Christ of you, the Christ in you, and the Christ as you. It is your divine nature that is automatically connected to the universe, that region of you that is pure, whole, and complete. That is the very fundamental aspect of who you are. You are not just a person that you can identify through your five senses. You are not only human, you are human and divine. So as you walk the earth, walk the planet, engage in human experiences, there is a divine aspect and capacity that is living in, through, and as you. Because that aspect of you is connected with infinity, it is connected to the divine mystery. There is nothing in that region of you that is not known. That is there as a wellspring for each of us to take advantage of, so that we can have that divine dimension to our lives, so that as we do our thing on a day-to-day basis, we can see with divine eyes, hear with divine ears, and touch with a divine touch. That is the gateway through which we can have the opportunity to employ divine wisdom, discerning from spiritual ideas, spiritual truth, or discerning from the living word that we are. And when I say the living word, it reminds me of that scripture in John where Jesus says that ye search the scriptures because in them you believe you're going to find the word. Yet come to me, and I am the living word. And what is that living word that Jesus is? It's not Jesus the person. It is the I am power through which Jesus was completely cognizant of and what he completely represented. That's what he completely represented. That is what the living word is. You are the living word. I am the living word. So as we tap into that, it gives us the power and the capability and the capacity to have that dimension flow in. And from that place in us, we judge, we evaluate, we discern. And from that place in us, we determine how to apply what we know. And when we do that, it leads to an experience of life that is a blessing, that is beneficial. It opens us up to all of the goodness of life, the love, the joy, the beauty, the prosperity, because we have an open channel to our divinity, and we have a consciousness to where we allow that open channel of divinity to flow through into how we see, how we speak, how we engage in the world, and that creates the beautiful experience of life. Now, I want to give an example as an illustration in terms of how to understand this difference between just using run-of-the-mill wisdom that comes from a cultural or a worldly way of consciousness and wisdom from a divine perspective. There's times in my life, and I'm sure that there's times in your life where you might go to a store or go to some place out in public and you see a person who appears to be what is called in the culture a homeless person, or a person who seems to be what they call on the dregs of life. And that person may sometimes ask for money or ask for something. There was a time whenever I encountered this that I would notice, and I would either go the other way or I would kind of look down and act like I don't see the person or I don't recognize the person. That is a way of navigating that experience. It comes from the consciousness of, I don't want to be bothered, and I'm just going to ignore that you're there and just go about and do my thing. And then one day I received an inspiration to, you know, you should acknowledge people. Each and every one of us as human beings, we want to be seen. We want our personhood seen, and we want to be seen as having some sort of worth. In other words, with dignity. So what I decided to do is anytime I encountered a person such as that, I'm going to take a deep breath and get centered and listen to see how I should navigate the situation. But at the very least, I'm going to look at that person in the eye and I'm going to smile. And if I feel inspired to give them money in that moment from intuitive prompting, I will. If I'm not inspired to do it, I won't. However, what I am going to do as a rock solid standard is I'm going to look at them in their eyes, I'm going to smile at them, and I'm going to acknowledge them. And so I started doing that. And it's interesting that when I do that, even when it's a situation where I'm unable to offer any assistance or I'm not moved to offer any assistance, and in situations where I feel safe, that when I do that, when I look at them and I smile and say, you know, I'm sorry, I'm unable to help you, but I see you and I wish you well. It's amazing how people light up, because beyond what they're asking for, what they're really asking for is acknowledgement. Here's another situation of the same kind of magnitude. Another thing that I like to do. You go into Quick Trip, or you go into Dillon's, or you go into any sort of convenience store, and there's a person there working at the cash register, and they're just working, you know, helping customers one by one. One of the things that I love to do, and again, this was something that I listened to the voice within, and I start doing because of that, not because I saw it, but because I felt moved to do it, was that look at the person in their eyes, smile, look at their name tag, acknowledge them by name. And it is amazing that when I do that, when I say, thank you so much, Sylvia, you have a great day. Because they're not used to being acknowledged in that way. They're not used to being seen in that way. What that was a soul to soul encounter in a culture that is, in a lot of ways, soul starved. And if we ever want to create a different situation, I think we better get clear about having the kind of way of relating to where we feed each other cellularly, if that is such a word, cellularly. But I digress. The point of saying that is, I listen to an inner prompting to relate differently and to discern differently, and to discern the fact that they're not just a worker, but they are the Christ, as am I. So why not feed that in the interaction? And then we both come away lifted, lighter, and more at peace. In those situations, I was willing to listen to an intuitive prompting. I deployed that into divine wisdom to discern how to navigate. And then I chose how I was going to operate. Now, wisdom, divine wisdom, how do I know that I'm operating from divine wisdom? Or how can I ensure that I'm operating from divine wisdom? Well, there are two keys. One is the lens through which I see the wisdom, and two, what is experienced as a result of it. So wisdom works very well with the power of love. And this is that first key. When we use wisdom with the power of love, which is that power to harmonize and to bring together. And I specifically look at it through the love lens of loving God, loving myself, and loving my neighbor, then it allows me to get down to the nitty-gritty of things. Because if I love myself and recognize myself as a divine being, innate divinity, and I relate to myself that way via my spiritual practice, via how I live my life and how I carry myself, not saying that I'm perfect, but I'm on the quest, and that's true of everybody. Then that gives me the basis from which to see everyone else. And as long as I have a healthy reverence for the divinity within, that gives me a very good basis from operating from love energy to deploy that power of wisdom. It's going to ensure that I deploy wisdom in a high and holy way, in a healthy way, in a way that is beneficial to myself and those that I interact with. So using wisdom through the lens of love, or coupling those two powers together, is one way to ensure that we're using the faculty of wisdom in a high and holy way. That's one way. The other way is to take stock in, when I apply wisdom, what is the feeling tone and what is the sense of energy that I'm experiencing as a result of my application of wisdom? And I can't think of any better way to describe it than the scripture in James chapter 3, verses 17, as far as the characteristics of the deployment of wisdom. But the wisdom that comes from heaven is, first of all, pure, then peace-loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy and good fruit, impartial, and sincere. The wisdom that comes from heaven is first pure, then peace-loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy and good fruit, impartial, and sincere. So in experiencing all of these different fruits and all of these different characteristics of the wisdom that comes from heaven, or the wisdom that comes from our innate divinity, does it give me a sense of peace? Does the effort feel complete? Am I lifted as a result of that application of wisdom? Not lifted in a superficial way, but lifted in the sense that my soul feels more liberated. Those are some characteristics that can let me know that my deployment of wisdom is in a very healthy way. And so as we deploy that wisdom from a divine perspective, that's what gives us the power to do amazing things, as Michael Gott so beautifully illustrated in that song. That's what gives us that power. That's what gives us the energy and the wherewithal to show up as our best self and to be the best Christ that we can be. That's what gives us the wherewithal to be effective in our lives and to be a blessing to ourselves and to be a blessing to others. It's that high and holy wisdom received from a heart-mind consciousness that is open and receptive to discernment and application with a divine input to ensure that we are blessed by the experience and blessed by what it is that we're allowing to show up through us. Because when we deploy and apply divine wisdom to ourselves, we become the kind of people to where the mystery of the divine can flow through us and express as us, and we can be that, and we can be very effective in our lives, with the people around us, and in the world. I hold you all in very sacred space. And into that space, I speak a simple word of prayer: life, light, and love to you all. Namaste.